The crack of gunfire shattered the tranquil Montana sunset, sending Elizabeth Fletcher diving for cover behind a weathered wagon wheel as bullets splintered the wood around her. It was 1875, and what had begun as a simple journey to deliver supplies to her father's remote ranch had turned into a nightmare when outlaws descended upon the small settlement of Silver Creek. Elizabeth's heart hammered against her ribs as she peered around the wheel, her chestnut hair falling loose from its pins. The general store was already engulfed in flames, and the outlaws were systematically working their way through the small town, stealing what they could and destroying the rest. She knew she couldn't stay where she was. The wagon offered little protection, and it was only a matter of time before they spotted her. With the bandits momentarily distracted by their looting of the saloon, Elizabeth gathered her skirts and made a desperate dash toward the large barn at the edge of town. Her lungs burned as she ran, the fabric of her blue calico dress snagging on bushes and brambles. Behind her, shouts erupted as one of the men spotted her fleeing figure. "There's a woman! Get her!" Elizabeth didn't look back, fear propelling her forward until she reached the heavy wooden doors of the barn. She slipped inside, immediately searching for a place to hide among the hay bales and farm equipment. The building was eerily quiet compared to the chaos outside, smelling of hay and horses. Most of the animals had already been freed or stolen, leaving only empty stalls and scattered feed. She climbed into the hayloft, burrowing into the straw and praying she wouldn't be discovered. For a moment, there was silence, and Elizabeth allowed herself to hope they had lost interest in pursuing her. Then came the unmistakable smell of smoke. Owen Jackson pulled his hat lower against the driving wind as he rode toward Silver Creek. At 26, he had already spent more than half his life working cattle, first as a ranch hand for his father, and now as the foreman of the Broken Spur, one of the largest spreads in the territory. He was returning from delivering a herd to the railway station, his saddlebags heavy with payment for his employer. The first indication something was wrong came in the form of distant gunshots carried on the wind. Owen reined in his horse, a sturdy Appaloosa named Diablo, and squinted toward the horizon. A dark plume of smoke rose against the evening sky. "Trouble," he muttered, spurring his horse forward. As he crested the hill overlooking Silver Creek, the scene below sent ice through his veins. The small settlement was in chaos, buildings burning while mounted men fired indiscriminately into the air and at fleeing townspeople. Owen had seen his share of violence in the West, but wanton destruction like this sparked a deep anger in him. He reached for the Winchester rifle secured to his saddle, weighing his options. There were at least 8 outlaws that he could count. Terrible odds for one man, but he couldn't simply ride away. As he watched, something caught his attention, a slender figure in blue darting toward the barn at the edge of town. One of the outlaws noticed too, shouting and pointing. Owen saw the woman disappear inside the structure just as 2 of the bandits wheeled their horses in that direction. He didn't hesitate. Keeping to the tree line, he urged Diablo down the slope, circling wide to approach the barn from behind. As he dismounted, tying his horse to a post out of sight, he saw one of the outlaws fling a burning torch onto the barn's roof. Elizabeth fought back panic as smoke began to filter through the wooden planks of the hayloft. From her hiding place, she could see flames licking at the edges of the roof above. The dry hay and timber would catch quickly. She needed to get out immediately. She scrambled down the ladder, coughing as the smoke thickened. The main doors were no longer an option. She could hear the outlaws waiting outside, laughing as they watched the fire spread. "Burn her out, boys. She'll come running soon enough." Elizabeth frantically searched for another exit, making her way toward the back of the barn where a small door led to the pasture beyond. Her eyes stung from the smoke, and the heat was becoming unbearable as the flames spread rapidly across the roof. When she reached the back door, her heart sank. It was barred from the outside, impossible to open from within. Desperation clawed at her as she pushed against it uselessly, then began looking for something to break it down. She was hefting a heavy shovel when a section of the burning roof collapsed, sending flaming debris crashing down and blocking her path. Elizabeth screamed, stumbling backward as the fire raced across the hay-strewn floor toward her. She was trapped, surrounded by rapidly spreading flames with nowhere to go. Owen moved silently around the perimeter of the barn, keeping out of sight of the outlaws at the front. He could hear their jeering voices as they waited for their victim to emerge. The rear door was secured with a wooden bar, which he quickly removed before easing it open and slipping inside. The interior was already thick with smoke, flames dancing across the rafters and spreading down the walls. He pulled his bandana up over his nose and mouth, eyes watering as he scanned the burning structure. "Hello," he called out, his voice rough from the smoke. "Anyone in here?" A coughing fit answered him, followed by a desperate cry. "Help, I'm trapped." Following the sound, Owen pushed through the smoke until he saw her, a young woman with terror in her eyes, backed against a wall with flames closing in from all sides. Her dress was smudged with soot, her face pale except for the flush of heat on her cheeks. Without a word, Owen shrugged off his long canvas duster coat and rushed forward, dodging a falling beam. He reached her just as another section of roof collapsed nearby, showering them with sparks. "Come on!" He shouted over the roar of the fire, wrapping his coat around her shoulders and lifting her into his arms when he saw she was barefoot, having lost her shoes in the chaos. "Hold on tight." Elizabeth clung to her rescuer as he navigated through the inferno, moving with surprising agility for such a tall man. The coat shielded her from the worst of the heat and falling embers as he carried her toward the back door. Outside, she could hear shouts as the outlaws realized something was happening. They burst through the door into the cool evening air just as the barn's structure groaned ominously behind them. Without pausing, Owen ran with Elizabeth still in his arms, heading for the cover of trees behind the barn. Behind them, the building collapsed in a spectacular eruption of flames and sparks. "My horse is just ahead," Owen said, his voice hoarse from smoke. "We need to move fast before they circle around." Elizabeth nodded, still clinging to him, unable to find her voice. As they reached his waiting Appaloosa, angry shouts confirmed the outlaws had discovered their escape and were giving chase. Owen lifted Elizabeth onto the saddle, then swung up behind her. "Hold on," he ordered, spurring Diablo into motion just as the first bullets whizzed past them. They rode hard into the gathering darkness, the sound of pursuit gradually fading behind them. Elizabeth's mind reeled with the sudden turn of events, the attack, the fire, and now her flight with this stranger who had risked his life to save her. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible over the pounding hooves. "I've got a lined shack about an hour's ride from here," Owen answered, his arms secure around her as he guided the horse. "We'll be safe there for the night. I'm Owen Jackson, by the way." "Elizabeth Fletcher," she replied, suddenly aware of how intimate their position was with her pressed against his chest. "Thank you for saving my life, Mr. Jackson." "Call me Owen," he said, and though she couldn't see his face, she could hear the smile in his voice. "And you're welcome, Miss Fletcher." The lined shack was little more than a one-room cabin nestled in a small clearing, but to Elizabeth it looked like a palace after their harrowing escape. Owen helped her dismount, then quickly attended to his horse before leading her inside. "It's not much," he said, lighting a lamp to reveal the sparse interior: a small stove, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a narrow bed pushed against one wall. "But it's dry and defensible." Elizabeth stood awkwardly in the center of the room, still wrapped in his coat. Now that the immediate danger had passed, she became acutely aware of her disheveled appearance and the impropriety of being alone with a man she'd just met. "I need to return to town," she said, though the thought filled her with dread. "My father will be worried sick." Owen shook his head as he stoked the stove to life. "Silver Creek isn't safe right now. Those men might still be there, and in the dark, we can't be sure who else might be waiting. We'll head to the nearest sheriff in the morning." He was right, of course, but the situation remained awkward. Elizabeth hugged his coat tighter around herself, suddenly cold despite the warmth spreading from the stove. "Are you hurt?" Owen asked, his deep voice gentle as he noticed her trembling. "No, just shaken," she admitted, "and filthy." She gestured to her soot-stained dress and face. "There's a basin and some water," he offered, retrieving a metal bowl and a canteen. "And I have a spare shirt you can wear. It'll be big but cleaner than what you've got on." Elizabeth accepted his offer gratefully, and Owen respectfully turned his back while she used the water to wash away the worst of the soot and changed into his offered shirt. It hung like a dress on her slender frame, but it was clean and smelled of sunshine and horses, somehow comforting. "Better?" he asked when she told him he could turn around. "Much, thank you." Elizabeth sat on one of the wooden chairs, suddenly exhausted as the events of the day caught up with her. Owen busied himself preparing a simple meal from his supplies: beans, jerky, and coffee. As they ate, Elizabeth studied her rescuer properly for the first time. He was perhaps 5 or 6 years older than her 20 years, with sun-browned skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His dark hair was in need of a trim, curling slightly at his collar, and a day's stubble shadowed his strong jaw. "What brought you to Silver Creek?" she asked. "It's not exactly on the main trail." "I was returning from delivering cattle to the railway at Fort Benton," he explained. "Taking a shortcut back to the Broken Spur." "The Broken Spur? You work for Mr. Reynolds?" Owen nodded. "I'm his foreman." "Our ranches are neighbors then," Elizabeth said with surprise. "My father is Thomas Fletcher. We own the Rocking F." Recognition lit Owen's eyes. "Fletcher. I've heard the name, but I don't believe we've crossed paths before. I would have remembered." There was something in the way he said it that made heat rise to Elizabeth's cheeks. "We've only been there 2 years. My father moved us from St. Louis after my mother died." "I'm sorry about your mother," Owen said sincerely. "Thank you." Elizabeth sipped her coffee, finding comfort in the bitter warmth. "What about your family?" A shadow crossed Owen's face. "Lost my parents to cholera when I was 16. Been on my own since, mostly." "I'm sorry." Elizabeth echoed his earlier sentiment, impulsively reaching across to touch his hand. The brief contact sent an unexpected jolt through her, and she quickly withdrew. They talked late into the night, the initial awkwardness melting away as they discovered shared interests and experiences. Owen told stories of life on the range, while Elizabeth spoke of her struggles adapting to frontier life after the refinement of St. Louis. When exhaustion finally overtook them, Owen insisted Elizabeth take the bed while he made a pallet on the floor near the door. Despite her protests, he was adamant. "I've slept on worse, believe me," he assured her with a wry smile. "Get some rest, Elizabeth. Tomorrow might be a long day." Elizabeth lay awake for some time, listening to the steady rhythm of Owen's breathing across the small cabin. This man had risked his life to save a stranger, then treated her with nothing but respect and kindness. In the midst of violence and terror, she had found something unexpected: a sense of safety and connection she hadn't felt since leaving St. Louis. With that comforting thought, she finally drifted into sleep. Morning came with golden light filtering through the cabin's single window. Elizabeth woke to find Owen already up, preparing coffee and what appeared to be flapjacks on the small stove. "Good morning," he greeted her, his smile warming something inside her. "Thought you could use a proper breakfast before we ride." "It smells wonderful," she said honestly, combing her fingers through her tangled hair in a futile attempt to look presentable. "Thank you." After breakfast, Owen offered her his duster coat again for the ride. "It'll protect you from the sun," he explained, helping her onto Diablo. "And it's not proper for you to be seen in just my shirt." The journey to the nearest town with a sheriff took most of the morning. Owen was a steady, reassuring presence behind her on the horse, occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing observations about the land they passed. Elizabeth found herself hoping the ride would last longer, even as she worried about her father's concern. Sheriff Mills of Copper Springs listened gravely to their account of the attack on Silver Creek. "Been hearing rumors of a gang working their way through the territory," he said, scratching his graying beard. "I'll send telegrams to neighboring towns and organize a posse to check on Silver Creek." He turned to Elizabeth with concern. "Miss Fletcher, I can arrange an escort to take you home to your father's ranch." Before she could respond, Owen spoke up. "If it's all the same to you, Sheriff, I'd like to see Miss Fletcher safely home myself. Our ranches are neighbors, and I feel responsible for her welfare after everything that's happened." The sheriff studied Owen for a moment, then nodded. "That seems reasonable. I'll send word to Thomas Fletcher that his daughter is safe and on her way home." They set out after midday, Elizabeth now wearing a borrowed dress provided by the sheriff's wife. It was slightly too large and outdated in style, but clean and whole, a vast improvement over her ruined clothes. The ride to the Rocking F took them through some of the most beautiful country in the territory, rolling hills covered in prairie grass that rippled like golden waves in the afternoon breeze, stands of cottonwood trees marking the course of creeks, and in the distance, the dramatic silhouette of mountains against the vast Montana sky. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Elizabeth said as they paused to rest the horse. "I didn't appreciate it when we first arrived. I was too busy missing St. Louis." "And now?" Owen asked, helping her down from the saddle. Elizabeth looked around at the sweeping landscape. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. There's a freedom here you can't find in the city." "That's exactly it," Owen agreed, his face lighting up. "The first time I saw this country, I knew I'd never leave. A man can breathe out here." They continued their journey, conversation flowing easily between them. Elizabeth found herself telling Owen things she'd never shared with anyone, her secret desire to raise horses rather than cattle, her frustration with the limited options available to women, her occasional loneliness on the isolated ranch. Owen listened with genuine interest, neither dismissing her ambitions nor treating them as unusual. "You have a good eye for horseflesh," he commented when she described the breeding program she envisioned. "The territory could use quality stock like that." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the Rocking F came into view, a collection of well-maintained buildings nestled in a valley with a creek running through it. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, and even from a distance, they could see figures moving about the yard. "Home," Elizabeth said softly, surprised by her conflicted feelings. While she was eager to reassure her father of her safety, she was oddly reluctant to see her time with Owen end. As they approached, a man on horseback spotted them and raced toward the house. By the time they reached the yard, Thomas Fletcher was waiting, his weathered face etched with worry and relief. "Elizabeth," he called, rushing forward to help her down from the horse. He embraced her tightly, then held her at arm's length to examine her. "When I got the sheriff's telegram about the attack on Silver Creek, I feared the worst." "I'm fine, Father," Elizabeth assured him, then turned to introduce Owen. "This is Owen Jackson, foreman at the Broken Spur. He saved my life." Thomas Fletcher extended his hand to Owen, emotion making his voice rough. "Mr. Jackson, I can never repay what you've done. My daughter is everything to me." "No repayment necessary, sir," Owen replied, shaking the offered hand. "Anyone would have done the same, but they didn't. You did." Thomas clapped Owen on the shoulder. "You'll stay for dinner at least. I insist." Owen glanced at Elizabeth, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd be honored, Mr. Fletcher." Dinner was a lively affair, with Elizabeth recounting their escape while carefully editing certain details to spare her father unnecessary worry. Thomas Fletcher was an attentive host, clearly impressed with Owen's knowledge of ranching and his obvious respect for Elizabeth. As the evening drew to a close, Owen reluctantly announced he should return to the Broken Spur. "Mr. Reynolds will be wondering what became of me and his money," he explained with a smile. "Nonsense," Thomas declared. "It's too late to start out now. We have a spare room, and you can leave at first light if you must." Owen accepted the invitation, and Elizabeth felt a surge of happiness at the thought of having more time with him. After her father retired for the night, she found Owen on the porch, gazing at the stars that blanketed the clear night sky. "Thank you again," she said, joining him at the railing. "Not just for the rescue, but for everything after. Your kindness, your company." Owen turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "Elizabeth, I should be thanking you. These past 2 days have been, well, despite the circumstances, they've meant something to me." His honesty emboldened her. "They've meant something to me too, Owen." He stepped closer, hesitant yet determined. "I'd like to call on you properly if your father permits it, not as a neighbor or a rescuer, but as a man who finds himself thinking about you more than is probably wise after such a short acquaintance." Elizabeth's heart quickened. "I'd like that very much." For a moment they stood in silence, the night air humming with possibility between them. Then, with careful slowness, Owen reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "May I?" he whispered, his gaze dropping to her lips. In answer, Elizabeth rose on her tiptoes, closing the distance between them. Their first kiss was gentle, almost hesitant, a question being asked and answered in the same breath. When they parted, Owen's smile held a wonder that mirrored what Elizabeth felt blooming in her own heart. Over the following weeks, Owen became a regular visitor at the Rocking F. Thomas Fletcher, seeing his daughter's happiness and recognizing Owen's solid character, welcomed the courtship. The attack on Silver Creek faded into the background as life resumed its normal rhythms, though Elizabeth sometimes woke from nightmares of flames and smoke, only to be comforted by the memory of strong arms carrying her to safety. Summer turned to autumn, bringing cattle roundups and harvest activities that kept both ranches busy. Owen and Elizabeth snatched moments together whenever possible, riding the boundaries of their properties, picnicking by the creek, or simply sitting on the porch talking until the stars came out. During one such evening, as they watched a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Owen reached for Elizabeth's hand. "I've been thinking," he began, uncharacteristically nervous, "about the future." Elizabeth's pulse quickened. "What about it, Mr. Reynolds has offered to sell me a piece of his land, that section that borders your father's property to the east. It's good grazing land with a year-round spring." Owen's eyes met hers, earnest and hopeful. "I've been saving for years, and with my share of this season's profits, I could manage it." "Owen, that's wonderful," Elizabeth squeezed his hand. "Your own ranch at last." It would be small to start, he cautioned. Nothing like the rocking F or the broken spur, just a cabin and some grazing land, but it could grow in time. All great things start small, Elizabeth assured him, sensing there was more he wanted to say. Owen took a deep breath, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. When he opened his hand, a simple gold ring with a small pearl lay in his palm. "It was my mother's," he explained softly. "The only thing of hers I kept." Elizabeth's breath caught as Owen slid from the porch swing to one knee before her. "Elizabeth Fletcher, I know we haven't known each other long in the counting of days, but I feel I've known you all my life in the ways that matter. You're brave and kind and stronger than you know." His voice grew husky with emotion. "I love you. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Elizabeth's eyes as joy surged through her. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Owen, I love you too." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then gathered her into his arms for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. Thomas Fletcher gave his blessing readily, having come to regard Owen as the son he never had. The wedding was set for early December, before the worst of winter set in. The ceremony took place in the small church in Copper Springs, decorated with evergreen boughs and ribbon for the occasion. Elizabeth wore a dress of ivory satin ordered from back east, while Owen cut a handsome figure in a new black suit. Sheriff Mills, who had become a friend to the couple, served as best man. The entire community turned out for the celebration that followed, a testament to the respect both families had earned in the territory. That night, as they drove the wagon to their new home, a snug cabin, Owen had spent every spare moment building on his newly acquired land. Elizabeth leaned against her husband's shoulder, marveling at how much had changed in just a few months. "Happy?" Owen asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. "Do you ever think about how we met? How different things might have been if you hadn't happened to be passing by Silver Creek that day?" Owen considered this as he guided the horses through the starlit night. "I used to think life was just a series of chances and coincidences. Now I'm not so sure. Some things seem meant like us," Elizabeth suggested. "Exactly like us." He smiled down at her. "Though I'd prefer any future meetings don't involve burning buildings." Elizabeth laughed, snuggling closer against the December chill. "Agreed, though I wouldn't mind if you carried me across the threshold of our new home." "That," Owen said, "can definitely be arranged." Their cabin came into view, a welcoming light already glowing in the window, a thoughtful gesture from one of the ranch hands who had ridden ahead to prepare for their arrival. Owen helped Elizabeth down from the wagon, then swept her into his arms as promised. "Welcome home, Mrs. Jackson," he murmured against her lips before carrying her across the threshold. Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth, casting golden light over the simple but comfortable furnishings they had collected together. It wasn't grand or luxurious, but to Elizabeth, it was perfect, a place built with love, where their future would unfold. That winter was harsh, with blizzards that sometimes kept them snowbound for days at a time. Yet Elizabeth found joy in the cozy intimacy of their cabin, in learning to be a wife, in planning with Owen for the spring and the years beyond. When the snow finally melted and the first green shoots appeared, they began the work of building their ranch in earnest. Owen constructed corrals and a small barn, while Elizabeth planted a garden and started negotiations to purchase the first mares for her breeding program. By their first anniversary, the Jackson Ranch was taking shape, a small but growing herd of cattle, 5 quality mares in foal to a stallion borrowed from a breeder in Helena, and plans for expanding the cabin to accommodate the family they both hoped to have. That Christmas Eve, as they sat before the fire in their expanded home, Elizabeth placed Owen's hand on her still flat stomach. "I have a gift for you," she said softly. "One that won't arrive until summer." Owen's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "A baby. We're having a baby." At her nod, he gathered her into his arms, laughing and crying all at once. "I love you," he whispered fiercely. "Both of you." Later, as snow fell gently outside their window, Elizabeth watched her husband sleeping peacefully beside her. From the ashes of that burning barn had risen something beautiful, and enduring a love that had carried them through danger and uncertainty to this moment of perfect contentment. Life in the Montana Territory wasn't easy. There would be hard winters and dry summers, struggles and setbacks alongside the triumphs. But Elizabeth knew, with Owen by her side, they could face whatever came their way. As if sensing her thoughts, Owen stirred and reached for her in his sleep. Elizabeth curled against him, safe in the circle of his arms as she had been since that first desperate night. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the land in a blanket of pristine white, a clean slate for the new year. For their growing family, for all the adventures yet to come in the life they were building together on the frontier they both had come to love.